There was a graduate student working with me on uh, fishes in the drum family. They make a lot of noise, the males do, to attract females to spawning sites. And each species has rather a unique repertoire of sounds that they make. So we knew what a lot of these were so that we could identify the species. And then we would sort of pinpoint the spawning aggregation sites and characterize them. Anyway, this graduate student, Michael Saucier, was presenting his research at a national meeting some years ago, and he was going to play a recording of some of these sounds for the audience, and he accidentally pressed the wrong button, and two live crews started belting out some riprap, and it brought the house down. He recovered very nicely and played what he intended to play, but it was a good time, and he also got an honorable mention for the most entertaining presentation at the banquet that year. So that was rather hilarious at the time.
We've been teasing Vince Wilson, who heads the CES BS program, about his long speeches at commencement. So I decided to play a little prank on him. I got one of those balloons like a shark, and I had Tyler Money fly it in from the side. So we're sitting in the front, and Vince is talking on and on. All of a sudden, this shark comes in from the side and noses him, and he didn't understand why everybody in the audience was laughing, but everybody was just in stitches, and all of a sudden he gets hit on the side of the head by this tiger balloon. The whole place went up for grabs. I mean, I remember looking at Linda Bowie. She could barely contain herself, and everybody was just laughing like crazy.
7 years after starting work in 1971, I took my first sabbatical down to live for a year in southern Mexico, studying the Laguna de Terminos, which is about the size of Lake Pontchartrain, and it's part of the Usumacinta-Grijalva Delta in southern Mexico, and it's the largest area of mangroves in Mesoamerica, and it's the second largest riverine input after the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. My brother Richard, who now works for the Wetland Center in Lafayette, was I think in college, and he stopped and he went down to Mexico with us for a year, and stayed on an extra year and ended up doing his master's thesis on mangrove ecology. And so Laguna de Terminos is big, and one day we went across, and it's about 25 kilometers. It takes about 45 minutes to go across in a boat. We were doing mangrove research, studying the productivity of these mangrove forests, and on the way back we ran out of gas. And so we were in the middle of the lagoon. It was late afternoon, and we rigged up this makeshift rig out of a poncho and some paddles and stuff, and we're doubtfully going to make it back. But we saw a tugboat sitting out in the middle of the lagoon, just anchored. And this was when the oil industry really was taking off down there, and they had the big oil field out in the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of Campeche. And so we made our way over to the tugboat, and turns out it was from Morgan City, and there were two Cajuns on it, and they were cooking gumbo. And so we had, we were hungry and everything, so they gave us gumbo and then took us back to the island where we were living, where I lived for a year.
There was a place when I first started at the first location of my office. There was a house there, and on the floor I left some bags from sampling vegetation that day, so I left them overnight, and they were garbage bags. So when the crew came through that night, they took them all out as garbage. So I was pretty stunned at it. I learned how to label things and say do and don't after that.
We were working in Egypt, and Steve Murray had a project over there, and we were trying to set out a transponder site. A transponder is, before we had GPS, we had to electronically use electronic shore stations to triangulate to the ship. So you had to put the shore stations out, and then you had another station on the ship, and you could triangulate and get a very good location from those triangulation points. And so we were trying to find a place to put one of these transponders, and up on we were working in the Gulf of Suez, and so we wanted to put it up high so we could look down into the Gulf and cover a large area. And so we got to the top of this mountain called Jebel Zayt, and when we crested the top of that mountain, there was a guardhouse, and they had automatic weapons, and they invited us in. Well, we didn't want to go in, and so they said, no, you had to go in. They didn't speak English, but they pointed that we had to go in. So I was driving, took the vehicle in, and as soon as we got over the rise, you could look down and see that this was a big military, first-rate military complex. And I said, I am not driving down into that. So I turned around, went back to the guardhouse, and I said, no, and they said, okay, commandant. So they called the commandant and got him to come up to the guardhouse. And fortunately, he had been educated in the United States and spoke English. And he said, he didn't tell us what that complex was, but he said, what are you doing here? You know, what are your objectives? And we told him that we're oceanographers and geologists, and we're studying the Gulf of Suez and trying to find a transponder spot up there. Well, after about 30, 40 minutes of questioning, he said, go back. We were standing in this little village called Hurghada. He said, go back to Hurghada. And he said, do not get off the road. It was about, I'd say 25 kilometers to the main road. And that 25 kilometer stretch had been mined, and it was an active minefield. And we had already been off that road, walking over, taking pictures of tidal flats. And we were smart enough that we walked in tire tracks, you know, that we didn't get out of those tire tracks. But that was alarming to find out that we were walking around in an active minefield. And then these guys came to our cabin, and they went through all of our gear for about a week, every day for a week, to see if we were spies or something, you know, that are looking into the activities of the Egyptian military. And then the next year we worked with the Israelis on the Gulf of Eilat, which is just right next door. And we were telling this story to them, and they said, oh yeah, that's a secret missile base. I thought, holy moly, how did we stay out of an Egyptian jail? I don't know, but we were lucky.